Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this month's Portals Community Call, and Happy New Year if you're a returning Portals Community Call attendee. It's great to have you all with us today. I'm Jason Gumpert from MS Dynamics World. As always, pleased to be able to help put on these events. And as we get started here, please do know that we welcome your questions and comments as we go. Look for the questions block in the webcast interface and enter them in anytime. I know that Nick will be keeping an eye on that as he takes us forward here. We're also recording today's event and we'll be making that available to you after the session ends as well. So with that, I think we are ready to begin. Nick, welcome back, and you can take it from here.
Alrighty, thank you, Jason. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back to I don't know what is it, year six, I guess, of these calls. Um, so yeah, today we're going to be talking about a relatively new feature that Microsoft has introduced to Power Pages called Modern Lists, which is our kind of first update to forms and lists, at least the UI of forms and lists in quite a long time. So yeah, we're going to be going through that. Um, Start off with a quick introduction here. For those of you, if you're just joining us for the first time, my name is Nicholas Hayduk. I'm the president and software engineer with Engineered Code Consulting Inc., based here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. Um, I've been doing, I've been working with Power Pages for the last 15 years or so. My career began at ADX Studio, the company that originally built Power Pages that Microsoft acquired in 2015. At Engineered Code, we're a consulting firm that assists people with Power Pages. We've also got EC Learn, which is our LMS for the Power Platform that works within Power Apps and Power Pages. If you're not already and you are interested, please connect with me on LinkedIn. You've got my link there. Otherwise, if you're interested in Power Pages content, you can follow us on our Twitter. I guess maybe I should update that to X. We've got our blog, which I release something pretty regularly, at least kind of once a month. We've got a YouTube channel where we post not only the recordings of this call, but also a weekly tip. We just passed 300 tips over the new year, so we're into the 300s now in terms of those weekly tips. And we've also got the podcast. So the CRM.audio network hosts the Refresh the Cache podcast. So if you're looking for Power Pages content, lots of options for you there to take in. So that's me. As always, want to say thank you to Jason for this, these many years that we've been working on this together. Really appreciate all their support and assistance to host for hosting these calls every month. It's been a great partnership, and we get lots of kind of positive feedback from the community about these calls, and in large part due to Jason and his team and their facilitation of these events. So super appreciated. Let's talk about the agenda. So Portal's news. I'll let you in a little secret. One of the reasons we're a couple minutes delayed today is Microsoft released some new blog posts today. So I want to make sure that content was added to this section. Then we'll talk about modern lists, and then we'll say, we'll announce the time of the next community call. And as always, we will leave some time for Q&A. If you do have any questions, whether it's about today's topic or anything else, kind of Power Pages or Power Platform, web portals, that sort of thing, always open to taking your questions and answering anything that you might be able to ask. All right, so let's talk about the news. So, yeah, before kind of yesterday, there wasn't a whole lot. In fact, there's been nothing over the last month until recently. There was some stuff back in November, since we didn't have a December call, and that was kind of at the bottom of the list. But let's start off with kind of the most recent news. So, if we have anyone from Norway on the call, you'll be happy to know that Power Pages is now generally available in Norway. So that was a recent announcement here. I think that was the one from today. Great if you're in Norway. If you're not in Norway, probably not going to change your life. The one that I did find quite interesting that just came out, they call it ALM-Aligned Updates. So this one goes to the update of the Power Pages web application that occurs on essentially a monthly basis. Microsoft releases updates to the code that actually that's running within the web application hosting your Power Pages site. It's not something that we have much control over. It's not like we press a button to force the update to happen. Before this announcement, the way that it worked is there were essentially two different options. There's a button or there's a checkbox where you could say, hey, I want to be early upgrade. And so if you want to be early upgrade, that meant all the early upgrade websites were updated before all the not early upgrade websites. So that was the little bit of control you had over where your particular website would be upgraded in the whole kind of cycle of the web hosts being updated. Because essentially Microsoft produces this bundle of code and starts pushing it out to all the Azure Web App Services that are hosting the Power Pages sites. And the order or the timing of doing that and kind of deciding which ones to push it to were based on it would do all the early upgrade ones first before doing anything else. So the change in here is they're actually kind of adding a middle step. So what they're going to do is this: there's still the early upgrade. So if you have an instance that you really want to try the new stuff on, you can check that early upgrade and it will be at the beginning of the list. But now what they're doing is for all the ones that aren't early upgrade, they're separating it out and they're doing all the non-production environments first. So any of your environments that are non-production will get updated before any of the production ones. This is helpful because we've unfortunately ran into a few cases where we did have our say production updated first and it wasn't done in development, and then you can end up into like where things are not promoted and your ALM processes kind of fall apart. So having that control of saying, okay, it's going to update here first, or so if you have bugs in if the new updates impact your site in any way, you could see it happen in production before it ever happened in your dev or test environment if your dev or test environment wasn't enabled for early upgrade. So with this new change in place, you don't need to kind of specify that all of your pre-production sites are set for early upgrade. You'll know that they will be upgraded before any of your production websites will. So a nice change from Microsoft on that one. So look forward to that for that kind of happening here going forward. What else we got on the list? So these are the last couple of the ones from almost a couple months ago now. So one of them is that the Power Pages dashboards are now available within the new Power Platform Admin Center. If you're still using the old Power Platform Admin Center, there's kind of a toggle switch at the top where you can click the button and it will flip to the new Power Platform Admin Center. So the dashboards that are available in the old one are now available in the new one. So they're not new dashboards, they are available in that new Power Platform Admin Center. And then the other thing that they announced since our last call was the ability to use Copilot to create a new web page within the Pages workspace. So before Power Pages was capable, the Copilot within Power Pages was capable of creating a web page, but you had to do it through the Copilot pane. So you had to use the Copilot pane on the right-hand side and ask it to create a page. Now, with this experience, when you go to add a new page, you can add the new page kind of normal, select your template, or you're prompted with kind of describe what you want. So Copilot has been integrated directly into the page creation experience. You don't have to go explicitly to the Copilot pane and ask it to create a page. So that's the change there. The other thing I want to discuss is there was a blog post that was released by Stratus Security regarding some vulnerabilities that they found. Now, thankfully, these vulnerabilities have been patched by Microsoft, but I just wanted to kind of talk about what those vulnerabilities were at a high level. So you can see I've got them. They were discovered kind of December of 2023 through February of 2024. So there's kind of a few month period where the folks at Stratus Security had discovered. It was essentially kind of three different. I think there were three kind of major issues that they discovered, and then they were kind of patched all relatively quickly. I think they were saying the first the first one took a little bit of back and forth for them to kind of work through what was going on. And then once they kind of got their communication figured out, the last couple issues that they found, they were able to get patched pretty quickly. So there were kind of two main problems, all related to the web API. So the point of this is not to scare you away from using the web API, but it is to, it does highlight the important fact that whenever you open, like the web API opens a pretty big door into your Dataverse instance. And so it's important that we're always being extra careful when we enable it. I always kind of encourage my team to like, okay, what are the alternatives? Do we need the web API, or are there other ways that we can deliver the same functionality without using the web API? And when we're just say querying data, often we can use Liquid and some other like techniques where you're kind of building your own little web services that don't mean turning on the entire, turning on the web API for a table. Because once you enable the web API for a table, you're exposing that table so that the user can kind of query it and do all the things that, yes, you maybe allow them to do it, but sometimes we find that people expose the web API for them to be able to say get at one particular record. But the web API lets them kind of query all the records that they have access to. So it's again, there is that security model there, but I just find with the web API, often people are opening up a bigger door than they might expect. So so in this particular case, the problems, and last call we talked about how the Power Pages is getting hacked, and in those cases, I'm a little skeptical because it wasn't that there was a bug; it was just like the product was acting exactly like it was supposed to. In this case, no, these were real bugs. These were things that were security issues that have been patched and fixed. So the first one was the ability to filter on columns that we didn't have access to. So when you were executing an OData query with the filter syntax, you could filter on a column that you didn't have access to. So that didn't mean that the data you didn't have access to wasn't in the response. It wasn't in the response, so it didn't give you access to that data. But clever people can figure out. You can figure out a lot about the data by being able to query it. So obviously, you could start running things where it's like, give me all the records where the thing equals X. Now, just because X isn't returned in the response, you do know that the answer is X. So you can use those types of queries to kind of infer what the data might be underneath the scenes. So that was the first thing that they discovered. So Microsoft was able to patch that so that you're no longer able to filter on columns that you don't have the permissions to do. And again, so this goes back to the web API column permissions that you can set up. And so the second one here, and so I said that there were three issues. The second one they discovered both on the both within the OData syntax and if you use fetch XML. Essentially, that if you did an order by, and you have to do an order by descending. If you did ascending, it didn't work. But if you did an order by descending on a column that you didn't have access to, it's still, for whatever reason, I'm not sure where this bug came from, but for whatever reason, it would include that column in the response. So that's not good. So for example, if you didn't have, say, access, I think the example they use in the blog post is like, so if you don't have access to the email address, you could say order by descending email address, and all of a sudden email address would come back in the response. So again, that's been solved. I don't think you should be able to order by something you don't have access to, but obviously the fact that that column even showed up in the response was bad. So all of those issues have been patched by Microsoft. But again, the web API is an excellent tool, and I think I've said this in the past. It's been a game changer in terms of what we can do without going to really kind of more complicated architectures like a companion app. At the same time, being, with great power comes great responsibility. Just know that it's not the only tool, and sometimes there are other tools you can use. Again, fetch XML within Liquid. If you're just reading data, often the web API is probably giving giving you kind of too much power, and there's other ways that from a security standpoint might just might work a little bit better and not kind of open stuff up. Um, we often see, so for example, on tables where for whatever reason you have to give global table permissions. If you open up the web API and you have global table permissions, even if in your UI you're only showing certain records, you're basically saying anyone can query all records. So that's a challenge. So just be careful when you're using the web API and kind of use it if you need to. But if there are other ways that you can kind of lock things down, really recommend that you do that. Okay, so let's talk about today's topic, which is modern lists. So, as I mentioned, it's a new user interface for lists. It is in preview, so it's not generally available. So depending on your policies, your organization's policies, maybe this isn't something you should be using in production, but something you can play around with if you want. In terms of the features, what does it do? So there's kind of four main features that we have when we're looking at modern lists. So the first one is shimmer loading, and we'll talk about what that is. There's infinite scroll, there's filtering in the column headings, and there's an advanced styling interface. So those are the four big features that you're going to get out of modern lists. Now, the alternative to modern lists, the kind of old school lists, I think Microsoft refers to them as the classic lists. So now when you're kind of adding a list to a page, you have the option to either use the classic lists, or you can use the new modern lists. So let's go through those features. First one, shimmer loading. So I'm not sure who first invented this kind of technique, but to me, I think of it in like kind of Facebook maybe popularized it. But the fact that the loading screen, instead of it being just a spinner, before the data is available, they put something on the page that kind of resembles what the data is going to be. So in this case, you can see here that even though this is kind of while it's loading, even before we have the data, we're putting in some placeholders here to kind of mimic what where the data is going to be. So that's what we mean by shimmer loading. Rather than it being like a loading spinner, you've got this indication that, okay, something's going to appear here. It's not quite ready yet, but something's coming. So that's what the shimmer loading is. Again, if things are running quick, it's kind of a split second that it shows up on the page. But that's one of the features that with the classic lists, it's more of the it's kind of more of a loading experience, whereas this, we've got that shimmer loading. So that's a nice kind of more, again, modern. That's why they call modern lists. That's something you kind of see on modern websites. What do we have next? Infinite scroll. So what you won't see on a modern list is the kind of more classic paging, page 1, page 2, click next, previous, all that sort of stuff. With the infinite scroll, basically you continue scrolling, the records are then loaded automatically, and you just end up with a list as long as you're willing to scroll. So no more paging, infinite scroll instead of the paging. So that's another one of the features of the modern lists. The next one is filter in column headings. So in addition to sorting, if you click on the column headings, you also get that filter by option. This will be familiar to users of model-driven apps, Dynamics 365 customer engagement. So when you're looking at a view, you have the option to kind of put your filters into the column, to filter by clicking on the column headings. So that's the feature that exists here. So there's still the standard kind of little search box if you want, but the filter by allows you to kind of filter by those specific column headings. And then finally, and probably the most compelling reason why people will be using these modern lists, at least for now, is the advanced styling. So when you add once you've added your list to the page, you can click the little paintbrush icon and open up this styling or this design editor, which allows you to customize a number of the attributes that are available on to define things like, again, height, border, margin, padding, shadow. You can do that for the headers and the various rows. You can also define different background colors for alternating rows. Yeah. So, okay, so I have a question. Do we need the advanced data model for the modern lists? Do we need the enhanced data model? No. I don't I don't think so. I'll double check. I'm pretty sure the answer is no. Because I think the answer is no. I think the demo, we'll get into a demo here in a second. I'm pretty sure my demo environment is still the standard data model, so I do not believe you need the enhanced data model for this, as far as I know. So I think the answer to that is no, but we'll double check. But I'm pretty sure my standard environment that I use for demos is standard data model, and that's what I'll be showing you today. So I think the answer is no. You've also got the ability to copy the design, and we'll look at that here in a second, but you do have the ability to copy the design and use it on multiple tables. So we'll see that. So how do we choose the modern list? So the one thing to know is that whether a list is modern or not is not a property of the list itself. So if you think about kind of the olden days when we used to go back into the portal management app and we'd create a list in there, you won't see a field anywhere in there that says, oh, this is a modern list. So what makes something modern is how you add it to the page. So when you're adding the list to the page, that's where you define whether that's whether you want that list to render as modern or not. So there's kind of basically two ways of doing that. So there is a simple option if you're in the design studio. Essentially, there's a little toggle and it says preview, try the new and improved version of this component. You flick that switch and the list becomes modern. Now, what is that actually doing? Because I'm always curious to okay, if I flip this little switch, it must be doing something somewhere. And so what it's doing actually is setting a field or setting an attribute on the liquid control. So when you add a list to the page using the designer, what it's actually doing is dropping the liquid include statement. So it's saying include entity list, entity underscore list is the command for adding a list to the page. And quite simply, there's an is modern attribute on that liquid tag. And so if you say is modern true, then that list will display using the modern template. And if you don't have that attribute set, then you will get the classic interface. So if you're in the design studio, flip the switch. If you are just trying to include it using VS Code for web integration or something like that, just set that is modern true attribute, and that will essentially decide which within that entity list web template, because that's essentially what liquid include statement is, including a web template onto the page. In this case, the web template's maybe not stored as a web template in your Dataverse. It's a web template that's stored as part of the Power Pages code, but same idea. So that attribute is basically defining which version of that control to output. So that's how you can control what's there. So why don't we just flip over to a demo so we can see this thing in action. Okay. So here is my site. Let me just double check here. Yeah, portal management. So this is a standard data model site, and it is enabled in here. So we don't need the yeah. Or I see someone else has confirmed it as well. But yes, this is definitely a standard data model, and this is where it works. So if I want to add a list to the page, I'm going to do this. I've actually got an existing one, so I'm going to choose an existing list. But you can see here, try the new and improved version of this component. Don't want to create a new one because I've already got one set up. That's fine. Maybe I will create a new one. Edit list. So I'm going to create one. Oh, sorry. I just need to scroll. So I'm going to add the golf course is modern. Now, again, I just called it that for my testing purposes, just so I don't have to kind of set up all the views and stuff. But there's nothing about this list itself that makes it modern other than the fact that I've used that name. So this right here, so I can still say, so this is a modern one. I'm going to leave this unchecked for now. Click done. That will put that on the page. Unable to show preview, that's fine. Going to open this up. And we should see, I might need to log in. Oh yeah. So now we've got this list on the page. I'm going to make this AI insight stuff go away here in a second, but I've got my classic list component. And if I were to go back to here and say edit code, log in. If we look at this code, go away Copilot, we'll see that it just says we've got the AI stuff in there, which I'm going to get rid of, but it's just include this name and then the name of the list. Now, if I go back to here, let's say cancel, I'm going to say edit list. If I flip this switch, click done, now we've got it using the modern list. Let me get rid of this AI insight stuff. Just clean it up a little bit. So now we've got the new modern list. Preview that. I'm going to refresh this. So here's our new modern list. If I go back into here, edit the code. We will see, go back here, go to the end. We'll see all that's really changed here is modern is now true. Right there. So now we've got our modern list. Again, I'm going to refresh. You'll see very quickly here that we've got that shimmer loading. We've got those little bars that show up there. So that's our shimmer loading effect. We've got the infinite scroll here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to my list here. So you can see here we've got two, the paging side, if I go into this, paging is in what, more options maybe? Yeah, so we've got 2 records per page. So what it's actually doing, and so you might be wondering, okay, why do I see 4? You'll see when the page loads, it goes from 2 to 4 really quickly because I've essentially already kind of scrolled far enough for it to load. But that's why you see the 2, see 2 and then 4, because it's got that infinite scroll. If I had a whole bunch more records, it would keep loading as I scrolled. So that's our infinite scroll, that's our shimmer loading. And we've also got, I click here, filter by, and I can say filter by equals, now it has a name, apply, and now we've got our filtering in there. So in terms of the user experience, those are the 3 things that a user will see with the modern lists: the infinite scroll, the shimmer loading, and the filtering. Now, for the administrator, what's different for them is that advanced styling. So as I mentioned, there is the paintbrush icon. Click that, that opens up this styling interface. So I can control the border width and color, the height, the margin. If you want to specify per side or one global value, you can do that. Padding, shadow, shadow width and color as well. That's kind of for the table overall. And then you can also be specific about in the header, background colors, font information, border, and then on the rows, all that kind of same information, text align, as well as you can say banded rows. So if you select banded rows, you can then pick an alternating color for that. So let's say I want to do that, alternating color, that, let's just do that. So that's going to give you 2 different, alternating row color. So if I were to then close that, preview, it's going to apply my style to that. So now we've got my different colors in there. Now, if you've kind of gone through and you want some consistency across your different modern lists, they've implemented this ability to copy the design. So if I copy this design, basically it copies some JSON to the clipboard. So let me load this up. You can see I've done this before. So I'm going to just delete this. I'm going to paste. And so this is the JSON that contains kind of all the details. Now in my case, all I did was really set the banded rows. So there's my color mix in, the color with the variable. So, but this would contain all the details about the style I have for this. And then if I were to reset this, I've lost my banded rows, but if I paste design, it's going to go back to that design based on what's in the clipboard in my JSON. So somewhat rudimentary way of kind of moving your styles to different things. Of course, if you make a change on, say you have 10 of these lists and you make a change, you want to apply it to all 10, you got to kind of copy it once and then paste it into all of these. But certainly better than having to go in and kind of fiddle with all the different switches in here. So again, this is in preview. I would expect there would be some kind of improvements in some of these as it gets kind of closer to general availability. But that does apply. It does allow you to kind of share those settings across there. Obviously, it would be cool if we had some way to kind of define a central style, maybe in the styling workplace, to say, hey, this is my modern list style. And then from here, you could just pick, from your various styles that you've created. But at this point, this is what we get. We get the ability to copy and paste these designs. So that's kind of what the modern list looks like. We've got some hover functionality here. Now, what I want to talk about is we've just talked about kind of basic list functionality right now, just kind of displaying the data in a table. But what about all the other functionality that exists for lists? You might be wondering if that's supported or not. So let's look next. So what list features are supported? So if you're defining multiple views, that is supported. So your modern list will have a drop-down for as many views as you happen to define. Action buttons. So those are adding, whether it's the create or the download buttons that appear above the list, those are supported. The per row action items, so whether you want to add edit or details buttons, even the run workflows, activate, deactivate, those types of buttons that you can add, those are supported for modern lists. And there's also functionality where you can rename columns. So if you rename a column in the Portals management app or the Power Pages management app, if you use that functionality, it will reflect that on your modern list. There are, however, some things that don't work. So if you've got metadata filters set up, so those will just not be displayed. And those are when you set up the metadata filters, that allows you to create an area either above or beside your list that can have some advanced filtering. So it allows you to kind of filter by specific columns, or you can even set up fetch XML queries. There's a number of different filters you can set up with those metadata filters. For now, if you want to use metadata filters, you have to use the classic list. The big one for me is the loaded event. So on a classic list, every page that comes up is a separate AJAX request to the server to load that page of information. And when that happens, Microsoft has defined and documented the loaded event so that we can run JavaScript every time the data on a list is refreshed. That doesn't exist for modern lists. So it makes it impossible is maybe not too strong of a word, but it makes it difficult in a documented, supported way to interact with the table, because you have to be on the lookout for every time the infinite scroll fires and adds more data to the table. There's no documented event to handle that particular situation. So if you're doing, it would be common to write some JavaScript that says, like, maybe hides certain columns based on certain conditions or changes the style of certain cells. It's difficult to do that when that table is constantly changing. So there is no loaded JavaScript event for modern lists at this point. I would hope that these gaps would be filled when it goes to GA. But at this point, those to me are the two major gaps when it comes to, if you're going to be using modern lists, those are going to be the features that exist out of the box for classic lists. Now, I don't think classic lists are going anywhere. I think this is going to be, there's going to be kind of those two variations. So classic lists are certainly supported. But so not to worry, but it is something to consider if you're wanting to jump in and start using the modern lists. Just be aware that if you're either using the metadata filters or you need to interact with them via JavaScript, you're going to run into some challenges. Okay, is there an easy way, got a question here, is there an easy way to track when these preview features become GA? other than other than your call. It's easy to lose track. Um, is there an easy way? So generally, there's a few different things. So the Power Pages product team blog is where they'll often announce these things, or it will be in the release notes. So the release notes for the release waves. So release waves occur between April. The release wave 1 is April to September, and then release wave 2 is October through March. Um, and so in advance of that, often I think we see the release notes will be released in advance, well in advance of that. So for example, often in say like January, honestly, at some point we're going to see the release wave notes come out for the April release wave, and that will define when certain features are going to go GA or not GA. Whether so when there's a new feature in there, often the feature will be in preview, and then maybe in the next release notes it'll come out and say, hey, that feature is going to become generally available. And Microsoft does a good job of in those release notes, it'll actually like once it's released, you'll see a check mark there saying yes, this thing is now was released on this particular date. So the basically you have to monitor the product team blog because there are features that come out all the time that were not included in the release wave notes. So because often with Power Pages we might see anywhere from 3 or 4 features in a release wave notes to maybe 7 or 8 features. But we often see way more features than that released. It's just they're not part of the release notes. So the product team blog is generally where those announcements come out. But I have seen like features just kind of appear in the documentation or features that appear, kind of they're added to the release notes after the fact. So there's no one single place to look, but you'll find most of it either on the Power Page product team blog or on the by looking at the release wave notes. Those are the kind of the 2 best resources. All right. So again, a lot of the features do work. There are some features, particularly the metadata filter and the loaded JavaScript event, that don't work. But you can stick with the classic lists because they're still, still around, still very popular, still very supported. So, what's my opinion on when you should use them? Again, still in preview, so that might just kind of bar you there from using them. If you really need or want the filtering in the headers or the infinite scrolling, obviously this is an option. I think again, what a lot of people will be choosing them for is for the kind of the low code, no code makers who want to be able to customize the styling of them and are going to really like that that ability to use that designer to change the look and feel of them without resorting to CSS, custom CSS styles. And again, if you only really can use them if you don't need that JavaScript extensibility right now. But I think primarily, I think the people who are going to really like it are the ones that are going to want that custom CSS, and they like the infinite scrolling. For us, we're primarily still using classic lists. To me, that JavaScript roadblock is enough that even if a client really likes the look and feel of the new one, to basically block the ability to do that JavaScript is to me kind of too much of a deal breaker right now. Even if they don't need it today, often many lists will have a touch of JavaScript that they want to do something with, and so when you pick modern lists, you can't do that right now. And it's not something that I generally you wouldn't launch with modern lists and then because you need some JavaScript just flip back to the classic list. So it's kind of hard to go from modern list back to classic. So I'd say kind of our default is still very much the classic list, but in certain use cases the modern list can be a helpful tool as well. So for me, kind of one of the biggest positives here is we're seeing Microsoft invest in kind of improving the user experience for the lists. Hopefully, we're going to see some work on the forms as well, because if we got lists and forms kind of updated to the 21st century, that would be awesome. So this shows that we're making some progress. Again, it's in preview. There's still some work to be done, but we are seeing some progress in this space. So that's kind of it with regards to modern lists. Like I said, they're pretty simple to set up. The features that they give you are pretty well defined, and so if they're useful for your project, I'd say give them a try. All right, so get into some housekeeping items, and then we will open the floor in case there are any other questions. So our next call will be February 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. As always, want to say thank you to Jason and the entire team at MS Dynamics World. And I would open the floor to see if we have any additional questions, whether it's about modern lists or anything else you might have that is Power Pages or portals within the Power Platform, that sort of thing. If we don't have any questions, we'll be happy to wrap it up a little bit early today. Jason, I'm not seeing anything, so I think we can probably wrap it up there today.
Sounds good. Great job as always, Nick. Thanks to everyone in the audience for your questions. We'll be following up with more information from today's event very soon. But yeah, I think we can end things there. We'll see you back here next week.
We do have. Oh, sorry to interrupt. We do have a question. So Adrian's got a question about using Power Pages with internal users. So I'm not sure if you're going to provide more, but you absolutely can use Power Pages with internal users. In terms of licensing, they can be licensed with either Power Pages licenses, or I believe you can still use Power Apps licenses for those. Often the authentication for internal users, you can use the Entra ID, which is kind of built in, but you can also use if you license them with Power Pages users, you could use other authentication work. So follow-up question, does it use a contact record? Yes. Even if they're internal users, they're still contact records. It's in no way tied to system user records. So there's nothing different about an internal use case. It's just you're often using, it's different from a licensing perspective, perhaps. And maybe you're using Entra ID, but from a technical perspective, there's really not that much difference. So they still use a contact record. It doesn't use a user record or anything like that. And then another question here: Can we directly use it in Liquid? So I'm assuming that's a question related to with the modern list. So with the modern list, you use that is modern flag on the entity list include statement. Beyond that, there's really no way to interact with the modern list in Liquid. It would be more kind of JavaScript, but again, we talked about the limitations there. So I would say that there's not a whole lot of interaction between modern lists and Liquid. Adrian wants to know, does the contact have to be created manually? It would be the same, no different than an external facing portal. So you could either create the contact manually and then invite them, or if you open up open registration when someone logs in. Again, for internal portals, people are often using Entra ID. So you can have it set up so that when someone logs in with Entra ID, it will create a contact for them automatically. Or you can create the contacts in advance and then either use invitation codes or email mapping to have the people so that people are automatically associated with a contact when they log in for the first time. Okay.
Hey, Nick, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You were mentioning the blogs earlier. How do you stay up to date on the latest blog posts? Do you because I'm continually frustrated with the RSS situation at Microsoft Blogs. I'm just curious how you stay up to date on them.
I have a bookmark that I click on very regularly. Very old school.
Yeah.
And I've got other people like Jose as well, who's often on the call. he's checking them often as well. But yeah, I agree. I used to do the whole RSS thing, but yeah, now I just, you know, kind of part of my morning routine is to click on that link and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, just curious. It's been on my mind. I don't see any other
Okay.
questions. So should
All
we
right.
end it
Well,
there?
sounds good. Thanks everyone for your questions. Have a great day, and we'll see you all in February.
All right. Bye, everyone.